I am presenting Union Gospel Presses Sunday School Lesson number 10, Sunday, November 9th, 2025. The lesson is entitled Parting the Red Sea. Lesson text comes from Exodus chapter 14, verses 10 through 22. Related scriptures are Exodus 5:15 through 6:1. 15, 1 through 21, Joshua 2, 8 through 11, Psalms 106, 1 through 12, 1 Corinthians 10, 1 through 6. The place is Egypt. The time is 1446 BC. The parting of the Red Sea was an amazing event that the Israelites look back on throughout the Old Testament as a witness to the power of God. Today's aim, facts. To observe the power of God as he protected the Israelites. Principle, to understand that God will fight for his children. Application, to realize that the same God who parted the Red Sea hears and answers our prayers. Illustrating the lesson. When Moses obeyed God's command to hold his staff out, the waters of the Red Sea parted. While Moses held the staff, God used his power to divide the sea so that his people could pass through and escape Pharaoh's army. God is all powerful. Nothing can stop him from protecting his people, not even an Egyptian army or the Red Sea. Practical points. 1. Difficult trials often affect our reasoning. Exodus 14, 10 through 12. 2. We will see God's power at work in our lives if we are willing to patiently surrender our circumstances to him, verses 13 through 14. 3. As God provided a way of escape from slavery to Egypt, so he provides a way of escape from slavery to sin. Exodus 14, 15 through 16, 1 Corinthians 10, 13. 4. One reason God may allow trials in our lives is because they will bring him glory. Exodus 14, 17 through 18. 5. The Lord is like a wall of defense between us and his enemies. Verses 19 through 20. 6. The power God used to create the universe is the same power he uses to redeem his people. Verses 21 through 22. Golden text. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. Exodus 14, 14. Today we have two lesson outlines. The first is battle movements, Exodus 14, 10 through 19. And the second is deliverance through divisions, Exodus 14, 20 through 22. Introduction. When the Israelites saw the Egyptian army bearing down on them, their gut reaction was to abandon the great salvation God was working for them and surrender to their old life of serving the Egyptians. Exodus 14, 12 through 13. Because the Exodus foreshadowed our deliverance from slavery to sin, we can apply Israel's reaction directly to our lives today. For us, the temptation is to return to our old life of serving sin whenever our spiritual journey gets difficult. When trials come, we need to remember what is at stake. The Israelites probably thought their reaction was reasonable. Wouldn't it have been better to live as slaves than to die before they received their freedom? But more than physical life and death was at stake. Their question should not have been, how can we stay alive, but whom will we serve? Joshua 24:15. The Red Sea crossing gives us confidence to continue serving the Lord when trials come. God will make a way for us to keep following his path, even in impossible situations. Battle movements. Exodus 14:10. And when Pharaoh drew nigh, the children of Israel lifted up their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them, and they were sore afraid. And the children of Israel cried out unto the Lord. Verse 11. And they said unto Moses, because there were no graves in Egypt, hast thou taken us away to die in the wilderness? Wherefore hast thou dealt thus with us, to carry us forth out of Egypt? Verse 12. Is not this the word that we did tell thee in Egypt, saying, let us alone, that we may serve the Egyptians? For it had been better for us to serve the Egyptians than that we should die in the wilderness. Verse 13. And Moses said unto the people, fear ye not, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will show to you today. For the Egyptians whom ye have seen today, ye shall see them again no more forever. Verse 14. The Lord shall fight for you, and ye shall hold your peace. Verse 15. And the Lord said unto Moses, wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel that they go forward. Verse 16. But lift thou up thy rod and stretch out thine hand over the sea and divide it, and the children of Israel shall go on dry ground through the midst of the sea. Verse 17. And behold, I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians, and they shall follow them. And I will get me honor upon Pharaoh and upon all his host, upon his chariots and upon his horsemen. Verse 18. And the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, when I have gotten me honor upon Pharaoh, upon his chariots, and upon his horsemen. Verse 19. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went from before their face and stood behind them. Verses 10 through 19 capture three battle movements: the movement of Egypt toward Israel, the movement of Israel toward the sea, and the movement of the angel of God to separate the two camps. These are indicated by the repeated use of the Hebrew verb to set out, rendered as marched in verse 10, go forward in verse 15, and remove and went in verse 19. Egypt sets out toward the Israelites. Exodus 14, 10 through 14. Pharaoh and the Egyptians had been so afraid after the 10th plague struck down their firstborn sons that they could not get rid of the Israelites fast enough. 12:31 through 33. After the Israelites left, however, the Egyptians changed their mind and sent an army after Israel. 14:5 through 9. What led to such a sudden change? Verse 4 says it happened after the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. This heart hardening is a central theme throughout the Exodus story, so it is important to understand it. First, note that the text alternates between saying that God hardened Pharaoh's heart and that Pharaoh hardened his own heart. 7:3, 8:15. The actions of God and Pharaoh seem to have worked in tandem. God was indeed turning the heart of the king like a stream of water for his purpose. Proverbs 21:1. But he was not coercing Pharaoh to act sinfully. God did not force Pharaoh to do anything he did not already want to do. Second, note the reason God hardened Pharaoh's heart. He did it so that he would gain glory over Pharaoh and the Egyptian army. Exodus 14:4. God wanted the Egyptians to pursue the Israelites so that he would be honored by Israel and Egypt alike when he miraculously defeated the Egyptian army. When Israel saw Pharaoh's army marching or setting out after them, verse 10, they too had a sudden change of heart. Understandably, they trembled with fear at the sight of Pharaoh's well-trained army bearing down on them and preparing to pin them against the Red Sea. At first, they seemed to have the right response. They cried out to the Lord. Quickly, however, their cries turned into a panicked desire to surrender and return to Egypt. Their question to Moses about graves in Egypt was sarcastic, as if to say, weren't there enough graves in Egypt already? Moses, did we really need to go looking for a bigger one, the wilderness? Israel's complaint quickly turned to irrational anger as they claimed it would be far better to continue serving Egypt than to die where they stood. We might understand their panic given the circumstances, but this statement had serious implications. God was delivering Israel from slavery in Egypt so that they could serve him rather than Egypt. 8:1, 9:1, 13. Israel had been on board with the plan when the escape seemed to be going well. But the first time they encountered adversity, they wanted to run back to their old way of life. Israel's panic even led them to misremember their original opinion of the Exodus, claiming they had told Moses while they were still in Egypt that he should let them keep serving the Egyptians. While they did express disdain for the early results of Moses' interactions with Pharaoh, 521, nowhere does Exodus record the comment they claim to have made, and nobody was complaining when Pharaoh actually let them go. Only when their circumstances darkened did they begin to doubt their decision to leave Egypt behind. Moses responded with words of assurance, giving the people three commands. First, he instructed them not to be afraid. Second, he told them to stand firm. They were not to go through with their plan to surrender and return to Egypt, but instead were to hold their ground. Third, Moses told them simply to watch because they would see God deliver them from their trouble, and the army pursuing them would vanish from their sight forever. This would not occur by Israel fighting against them. While Israel watched, the Lord himself would fight for them. They only needed to hold their peace, verse 14, meaning they would not have to engage in the fight. Israel commanded to set out toward the sea. Exodus 14:15 through 18. Although Israel would not need to engage the Egyptians in battle, they were not to sit idly by. God asked Moses why he was crying out, then told him to instruct the Israelites to go forward or set out, presumably toward the sea, verse 15. God was not saying the Israelites' act of crying out to him was bad per se. Earlier in Exodus, God spoke about Israel's cries as a positive motivation for him to act, 3:7. But their cries had given way to unbelief, and it was time for them to move forward in faith. Jesus would later rebuke his disciples in a similar way. When they cried to him on their boat in the middle of a storm, he saved them from the storm, but also admonished them for having little faith. Matthew 8:24 through 26. God then instructed Moses to stretch out his staff over the sea. God would divide the sea, enabling the Israelites to walk through it on dry ground. Exodus 14:16. The term dry ground in this context is a clear callback to Genesis 1:9, when God caused the seas to recede and reveal the dry ground beneath it. God, who had originally commanded the seas not to go beyond their boundaries, Job 38:8 through 11, would now use his power over the sea to create a nation for himself. But what about the Egyptians? Wouldn't they just follow Israel through the sea? Yes, and that was part of God's plan. In fact, he would make sure they followed by continuing to harden their hearts. Exodus 14:17. God did not yet reveal to Moses exactly what would happen next, but he assured Moses that by following Israel into the sea, Pharaoh and his armies would become instruments for his honor. The Lord had identified himself to Moses by his personal name, Yahweh, in Exodus 3:14. Throughout the Exodus story, one of God's primary goals was for people of Israel to recognize that He is Yahweh. 6:7, 8:22, 10:2. In Exodus 14, He revealed that He wanted all of Egypt to know the same thing. Verse 18, verse 4. When the Egyptians saw His judgment coming on them, they would recognize that He was not just another God among many, but the self-existent I am who defends Israel. The angel of God sets out. Exodus 14:9 and 14:19. With the Egyptians bearing down on Israel, it was now the angel of God's turn to set out, remove from his place in front of the Israelites and move behind them. At the same time, the pillar of cloud, which represented God's presence, 13:21, also moved behind the Israelites. Biblical scholars debate whether the terms angel of God and angel of the Lord in Scripture refers simply to an angel or to the presence of God Himself. In certain passages, the identification is clear. In Genesis 31:11 through 13, for example, the angel of God calls himself the God of Bethel. In other passages, there is a close connection, but not an explicit identification. For example, when Moses encountered the burning bush in Exodus 3, the text seems to use the terms angel of the Lord, God, and Lord interchangeably. In other passages, there is no indication at all of who the angel of the Lord is. Because a language can use the same term in different ways, we need to be careful not to assume immediately that the angel of the Lord is always identical with God Himself. We also need to realize that even in the passages that identify the angel of the Lord as divine, there is a reason the author chooses to call him an angel rather than simply God. Perhaps the best explanation in these cases is that because God cannot be seen, God's angel acted as a visible manifestation of His presence when He wanted to communicate with or guide someone on a personal level. Genesis 16:7 through 11, 24:7. In Exodus 14:19, we have reason to think that the angel of God is a manifestation of God's own presence. His movement is closely connected to the movement of the pillar of cloud, 13:21. And it makes sense that Moses would identify the angel of God in this verse with the angel of the Lord from the burning bush, just as Moses had promised the Israelites in 14:14, the Lord was moving into battle position on their behalf. Deliverance through divisions, verse 20. And it came between the camp and the Egyptians and the camp of the Israelites. And it was a cloud of darkness to them, but it gave light by night to these, so that the one cannot near the other all the night. Verse 21. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all that night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. Verse 22. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. The angel of God divides the two camps. Exodus 14:20. God fought for Israel by dividing two things. First, the angel of God used the cloud of God's presence to divide the camps of Israel and Egypt. How would a cloud stop an entire Egyptian army? It seems that God did something similar to what He had done during the plague of darkness, 10:21 through 29. While the cloud cast darkness on the Egyptian camp, it gave light by night to the Israelites, 14:20. Just as in the plague of darkness, God made a distinction between Egypt and Israel, Only Egypt was covered in darkness, and the Egyptians could not come near Israel all night as a result. 10:23. During the plague of darkness, Moses confirmed Pharaoh's statement that they would never see each other again. 10:28 through 29. That was ironic because the darkness over Egypt literally made it impossible for Pharaoh to see Moses. Verse 23. At the Red Sea, Moses similarly promised the Israelites that they would never again see the pursuing Egyptians. 14:13. And once again, God used darkness to fulfill that promise. Despite popular movies' depictions of the Exodus, the text does not say that the Israelites looked back and saw the Egyptians pursuing them after they crossed the sea. Actually, the Egyptians were already retreating by the time the sea crashed back onto them, verses 23 through 27. From the time the cloud divided the two camps, the Israelites never again saw the Egyptian army alive. The next time they saw them was the next morning when the Egyptians were lying dead along the sea. Verse 30. But this scene echoes more than just the ninth plague. It also echoes God's first act of creation. God spoke into the darkness and there was light. Then he divided the darkness from light and called them night and day. Genesis 1, 2 through 5. Similarly, God brought light into the darkness at the Red Sea and separated the two so that the light lit the night in Israel's camp. This is more than an interesting similarity. This was God visibly signaling that Israel's Exodus was the beginning of his plan for a restored creation. The Lord divides the sea. Exodus 14:21 through 22. God continued to imitate his original acts of creation by dividing the sea to reveal dry land beneath. Genesis 1:9. Notably, he chose to do so through natural means, a strong wind from the east. This was certainly a miracle, but it did not happen instantaneously. The wind came from the east, which means the far side of the sea would have begun parting first. By the end of the night, it had progressed all the way to the Israelite side of the sea. Earlier, Moses had instructed Israel to watch the Lord's salvation and be still while he fought for them. Exodus 14:13 through 14. As it turned out, they would have to watch and be still the entire night. When it was finally time to cross the sea, the waters were like two towering walls on either side of the Israelites. In the following verses, we see how this miraculous deliverance fulfilled God's purpose of ensuring that both Israel and Egypt honored his name. When the Egyptians tried to pursue, God threw them into chaos, and the Egyptians recognized that Yahweh fought for Israel, verse 25. Then, after God plunged the sea back on top of the Egyptians, the Israelites praised the Lord for his immense power and believed in him. Verse 31. Questions. 1. Why did the Egyptians change their minds about letting Israel go? 2. How did the Israelites respond when they saw the Egyptians pursuing them? 3. How did Moses respond to the Israelites' fear? 4. What was the Israelites' role in their deliverance? 5. Why did God plan to let the Egyptians follow the Israelites into the divided sea? 6. Who was the angel of God in Exodus 14:19? 7. How did the Lord's division of the two camps help Israel? 8. What two previous acts of God did the parting of the Red Sea echo? 9. How was the parting of the sea a callback to creation? 10. How did God fulfill his purpose of getting honor for his name through the Red Sea crossing. This concludes the Sunday school lesson for Sunday, November 9th, 2025. Thank you for listening. Please remember to click the subscribe tab. God bless.